The cricket from a couple weeks ago is back. It's probably not the same cricket. That cricket was over another part of the office. This cricket's over here, like right next to the camera. So I'm glad that some of you said that you liked the cricket background noise and that you felt like I was in the forest. Because that's what you're getting for a couple of videos, because it's somewhere here. And it's my own damn fault, because the other day I saw what I think was probably a cricket. And I was like, I'm not going to kill it because I'm a benevolent lover of nature. And I didn't. And I didn't have time to catch it because I was in a video session. So it's here, serenading me. So I hope you don't find that annoying like I do, because I can't find it. So buckle up for my September wrap-up. And this video is being sponsored by Campfire Blaze. I will talk more about them later on in the video, but definitely pay attention, especially if you are participating in NaNoWriMo this year. I read 6 books, which is like not a lot. After I got done, I was like, what happened? Because I felt like I read every day. None of these books are particularly long, and I wasn't like distracted doing other things really. Maybe I was like watching too much TikTok. I don't know. I mean, like I'm working 4 days a week, which makes my reading those days like way less than it would be. And I've been kind of busy on the weekends, I guess, doing other things. I don't know, but I just didn't read as much as I thought I did. 6 is not bad. Let's get into it. The first book I finished was Set Fire to the Gods by Sarah Rosh and Kristen Simons. This was our House Salt Book Club pick from last month, so I will link our discussion, live show discussion for it on the screen. This is the first book in a YA fantasy duology. So in this society, the gods, which are basically elemental gods, they fight their battles via gladiators. So they do this with wars that are like gladiator battles and gladiator competitions instead of actual war. So our 2 main characters are on 2 opposing sides of this war, and they kind of get wrapped up in what is going on with the like conspiracy behind what is happening politically in this world. This does have a trigger warning for death of a parent. This book was just kind of meh for me. I think it had a ton of potential, but just fell flat in so many ways. It felt very like early YA in a bad way for me. Some other people in the group found it a little bit more fun, like early YA. I just kind of found it blah. I think the elemental magic could have been better. I think the gladiator stuff could have been better because we didn't get to see a ton of the gladiator fight stuff. And then some of the political stuff was just too like simple or like a little bit convoluted. Like it was either too simple or too convoluted and like nothing in between. So it just didn't really flow. I didn't care for like any of the romance dynamics. I didn't find many of the side characters to be interesting. There was one that I kind of liked. So overall this just kind of fell flat for me and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. I do not plan to continue with this duology. Then I reread The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. This is a book that I haven't read since, I think it was like one of the last books I read in 2018, I want to say. Yes, it had to have been. So this is the first book in the Gilded Wolves trilogy. This is a multiple point of view story that follows the characters within a crew, and they are like thieves that tend to specialize in these like magical artifacts, because in this world there are different forged objects which are like magical objects, and there are like different houses that are controlling these forged objects, and so they are going on this heist for this particular forged object, and everything kind of goes from there. I love this just as much on reread as I loved it the first time. These kids are like my favorite nerdy trash kids trying their best, and the atmosphere is so lush, and I really like the different houses, the political system, the world, just everything. There's a lot of like mythology based stuff in here with like Egyptian, Greek, I forget what else is in here like mythology wise, but like a lot of different mythologies, a lot of like death symbolism, like just a lot of cool stuff that I really like. And then I really like the dynamics between a lot of the characters. There's a lot of really amazing representation in here with different characters of different races, especially like biracial characters. One of our main characters is autistic. All that is mixed in with a really well-paced, fun plot. So I really liked this, and I was reading this in preparation for the second book that I also read this month, so I'll talk about that later. But I gave this 5 out of 5 stars yet again. I then read Seven Devils by Elizabeth May and Laura Lamb. This is the first book in a adult science fiction, I think it's a duology, and this has trigger warnings for death of a parent, abusive parents, amputation, a really authoritarian government if you don't want to deal with that right now, and plague if you don't want to deal with that right now. So this is another multiple POV story that follows particularly 2 characters, but they end up meeting with some of the other characters and we also end up getting their perspectives. But it's an all female-led cast, and they are basically trying to take down this authoritarian regime, but they all have different places within that because they are trying to take it down when they originally used to be like a part of it to varying levels. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and I do have a full review for it, so I'll link that on the screen. But this was disappointing for me. I actually buddy read this with Sarah Jane of the Book Life, and we both agreed that it was just not what we had hoped. It is this interesting world that I should have really enjoyed, but it just like, it wasn't fleshed out enough. Like, I really have no idea about a lot of this world. There's supposed to be like a pantheon of gods. They only really ever talk about one. You never know if that god is real or just their religion. And like the weapons and ships and stuff, like some of that stuff is a little bit cool, but like it could have been cooler. And then as far as our characters, like it took me a very long time to get attached to them because there were a lot of flashbacks and things. And usually I like flashbacks in these multiple POV stories, but it really like slowed the story down, and I didn't really care what was happening in any of the characters' flashbacks. So I feel like the flashbacks actually could have been added in book 2 to give context to a lot of stuff in book 1, because it was really hard to attach to them currently as like a crew, and I didn't really feel attached to them to the last like 10-20% of the book. And then I didn't really care for like many of the characters. I think I really started attaching to like one, but generally speaking I was kind of like, I don't really care what happens to them. So I didn't love this. I liked it a little bit more at the end. I could maybe read the second book, but I'm not sure, and I think I'll probably definitely lose interest by then. There was just like a lot of things that happened, and even like plot-wise, a few things were like wrapped up too easily, so like it just was disappointing on a lot of levels for me. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. And now I want to share a little bit about Campfire Blaze. Campfire Blaze is a browser-based suite of tools to help you keep your writing organized. This kind of program will be particularly helpful for my SFF fans and writers. Features include a word processor, character sheets, timelines, locations, maps, character arcs, an encyclopedia, languages, magic, etc. And Campfire Blaze is free to use for the month of October because right now it's an open beta. So if you want to check it out and see if you want to continue to subscribe, especially for Nano Season, the link for it is down below. You can build your own subscription for as little as 50 cents or a few dollars. You can also purchase any module you may want to use if you only want to use a couple of them. There's just a one-time fee to use that forever. Your stories are private and no one else has access to them unless you give permission, but this is also a great way to collaborate with beta readers or like writing partners and things on your stories, or even if you're writing with somebody else, you can share the stories and work and edit on it together. And you can try out all these features with the free version for the beta. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can write your manuscript in the word processor, develop your characters, design your plot and your world building and everything without restrictions in one program. So I will link that down below for you guys to check out. I then read Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. This is a book that I requested from NetGalley, and this is coming out on October 6th, so like right around the corner. This is an adult contemporary romance, and this was hitting so many like good buttons for me. So this is basically 2 characters who are both adults, like in their 30s, near 40s, who are both in a fandom for a show that's basically like this world's Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones exists in this world, but like this is also like, it's that caliber of show. And she is a fan fiction writer, and so is he, but he is also the lead actor on this show, but no one knows that he is. And so they are friends through the fandom and like best fandom friends, fan fiction friends. And then she ends up posting a picture of a like cosplay that she did on Twitter, and gets like a lot of attacks from trolls because she's a fat girl, and he doesn't know that it's her, kind of like comes to her defense and asks her out on a date, and then they like quickly start like interacting and everything kind of goes from there. This does have triggers for an emotionally abusive family on both sides. There's representation for her with the fat rep, and then he is dyslexic. So this like has so much. I actually want to do a full review on this, so that will probably be coming up on Monday very likely, because if I have the strength mentally with this damn cricket, I will try to do that. But this had so many things that I just really enjoyed. Again, it was like slightly older characters like in their 30s, which is like cool for me since I'm in my 30s. And then there was just like so much fandom stuff that was really fun in here, and this was definitely like written right after the Game of Thrones finale, basically. Like there's so many things, like basically you could consider this being the Jamie Brienne fandom, okay? And like the Game of Thrones thing, like the writers are shitty and the actors aren't liking how the final season is going, and like it is definitely like this was written in the grief that was the end of Game of Thrones for a lot of fans. So like if you want that like cathartic feeling, you'll probably really enjoy this. There was some like, it's not mistaken identity, but it might bother some people, so I want to mention it. It didn't bother me. He knows who she is as far as a fandom friend way before she knows who he is. And the reasons in here are like really justified, so that's why like it's not, I don't consider it as big of like a lie manipulation type thing. It almost feels like, and it's not similar to this in like a retelling kind of way, but like in You've Got Mail, when Tom Hanks' character knows before Meg Ryan's character, except for this guy doesn't even use the information that he knows like to benefit him really the way that like Tom Hanks' character even does. So there's that like element. So if you are at all like about any of that potential like lying or like omissions of truth be forewarned, but I didn't think it was a problem. I actually thought it was like a pretty compelling thing that was happening and like the reasons why and like what would you do in that scenario. So I ended up really enjoying this. I really pulled for the characters. I thought they were really sweet. There was some stuff towards the end that I was kind of like, that was like a little bit dramatic for no reason, but that's kind of how it is with romances sometimes. So I kind of forgave that. But I gave this 3.5 to 3.75 out of 5 stars and really recommend it. If again, you need that like fandom catharsis, Game of Thrones catharsis kind of feeling, this is really fun. And then I finally read The Silvered Serpents by Roshni Chokshi. This is the second book in the Gilded Wolf series. I've already done a full review, so I'm not going to go into like too much detail here, but this picks up shortly after the events of the first book, I think like a few months later. Obviously, leaving it spoiler free, a lot of stuff happens in the first book and the characters are all reeling from it. So I go into more detail there in my review if you've read the first book and want more details. But there's a lot of like reeling, there's a lot of angst, and yeah. I will say that I didn't love this quite as much as the first book. It was missing some of the lush atmosphere. I think there was a reason for that, but there's so much of what I really liked about the atmosphere in the first book that was missing here. I did love the characters even more in this book though, because we get to see like so many more dimensions of them, and some of them are being really like shitty and you're going to see like that behavior and just like the like how grief is affecting them and things like that. So that was really good. And then some of the plot stuff was like a little like I didn't love the antagonist side of things as much in this book, but especially towards the end, like both books in this series have like this almost like countdown effect where like something's happening and everything's kind of coming together. So that is always really well done, and I'm still looking forward to the last book in the series. I have no idea how it's going to wrap up, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read was Son of a Trickster by Eden Robinson. I listened to this one on audiobook, and this is our House Salt Book Club pick for this month. So this month's book talk will be tomorrow on my channel. This is the first book in a adult paranormal series. This is a book written by the First Nations author, and this is featuring First Nations characters and like folklore and things like that. This does have a lot of triggers in it for drug and alcohol abuse, child abuse and neglect, suicide attempt that's pretty graphic, and self-harm. So this book in the synopsis is kind of pitched as this character who is again like First Nations, and he's this teen and a lot of stuff is happening to him as far as like his family life is like kind of crappy and he copes with like drugs and alcohol and things like that, but then he starts having like weird occurrences happening and discovers things about himself. I mean, obviously the series in the book is called like Son of a Trickster, so you kind of get that. So that's how the book is pitched. Sadly, I didn't end up liking this for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't love the writing style. I know that's like a me thing, and that there have been people that have commented my review of it on Goodreads saying like there's a reason for that, and there's like you can look into like the Canada Reads discussion of this book as far as like why that was written that way and the indigenous influence and stuff that has, but it's just not a writing style that I particularly like. And then the magical elements didn't come in until later. That's not a problem necessarily feeling like, oh, I want to be shown this kind of representation like early, you need to teach me things. It wasn't like that. It was just like this book was pitched as a fantasy like paranormal-y thing, and we don't get any of that. Like I don't read any books that are like contemporary, not that this was YA, but like it was following a teenage character, so it's essentially like contemporary YA feeling. I was like, I didn't want any of that. Like that wasn't what I was here for. I was here for the magical elements, like regardless. So the fact that we didn't get any of that until 80% of the way into the book, and then there's like a rush of it, was just like not super fun for me. So most of the book is really like Jared dealing with his like really messed up family dynamics and coping with drugs and alcohol like a lot, and those kinds of characters are just characters I don't really like reading about. Like that kind of experience of like the drugs and alcohol and stuff is just like not something I enjoy. So that's why it fell flat for me. I still think that it's engaging enough that I want to watch the show potentially when like we have access to it, because I don't think America has access to it yet. I could be wrong, but I think the show will do a good job of that because it will integrate some of that fantastical element stuff sooner, because it will have to. But this was just like, again, 80% of the way of the book just being like a kid dealing with some like really rough stuff, and that's just really not something I signed up for. There are a few moments like before that 80% mark where like he sees some weird stuff. It's like one scene, but he thinks he's drunk or high like every time that happens, so like the character doesn't know what's happening. But like again, it's one of those books that like you go in, it's called like Son of a Trickster, like you know what he is, and like he does it until like the very end of the book. Like that was just kind of disappointing for me personally as a reader. So I didn't end up loving this. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, and I don't plan to continue with the series, but again, I do plan on probably trying to watch the adaptation at some point. So that is it for all the books that I read in September. Comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and what your favorite book that you read in September was. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.